Okay, so that's the judge addressing the defendant, and I'm joined with trial attorney Jeffrey Simon here out of Dallas, Texas. Jeffrey, I want to get your thoughts on this trial and specifically what we just saw with the sentencing here. Do you think that the sentence was too lenient?
Well, it's hard to say in this context what is or isn't too lenient. I mean, it's 10 years jail, and it's obvious that the judge was as conflicted as two juries were about what happened, but basically said so. And so it's unsatisfying because, you know, we like to say, well, the jury has spoken. Well, the jury hadn't twice. And I think she grappled with it, conflicted as she was. And, you know, he's going to do hard time, but he may have gotten away with felony murder. It's hard to know for sure. And I can tell she's struggling with it.
Yeah, and you know, you're a trial attorney, Jeffrey. You know how you have a jury, they're deliberating, and sometimes they just can't come to a unanimous verdict in a criminal case like this in order to render a verdict, either for guilt or acquittal. But this is the second time that this trial has been presented to a jury, and prosecutors must be somewhat frustrated here that another jury cannot reach a decision on those charges. Are you surprised that this jury, for a second jury here, could not reach a decision on the murder charges?
I guess I would say that the fact that the second jury hung sort of corroborates the confusion of the first jury. I mean, properly considered, beyond a reasonable doubt is a high burden of proof. And as Her Honor pointed out, nobody was in that park, in that part of it, but those two people. And there clearly was not enough physical evidence in the minds of two juries to conclude beyond a reasonable doubt unanimously of his guilt in relation to, you know, felony murder or even manslaughter for that matter.
Yeah, and you know, the judge's words to the defendant prior to sentencing, I think they rung true. I mean, you have to think about the victim's family, the deceased family. They went through one trial, and now they went through a second. Do you think that, you know, if there's a decision, they're not going to pursue these charges anymore against this defendant by the prosecution, of course? Do you think that would be something in consideration, the fact that the victim's family would have to relive this all over again?
Yeah, the prosecution's going to have to think very carefully about two issues. The first is, can we prove this beyond a reasonable doubt unanimously to any jury? Because twice we have failed. But the next is, what are the family's wishes? I mean, if the family say, look, we expect you to convict him for murder because that's what happened, or manslaughter for that matter, and several jurors agreed with that, and this is really just about, you know, more investigation, working harder, trying it again, getting a different jury. As long as it takes, we expect you to see this through, then I think the prosecution has to think about that very carefully too, because obviously the family's wishes are very important here. Now, that said, you know, in fairness, they do also have to consider the interests of the defendant. I mean, the defendant has, you know, eluded conviction at least twice. For the more serious charges. And you have to think about, you know, what resources, taxpayer resources should be devoted to trying to prosecute him a third time for those charges, especially given the fact that he is, in fact, going to do hard time somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 years.
Right. And Jeffrey, I do believe that the prosecution did make a decision. I hear that they probably considered all the factors that you just mentioned, and they have decided that they will not go forward with a third trial. So, you know, all the reasons that you mentioned were likely the consideration and in consideration for the prosecution when they made that decision. But this defendant is going to go to jail, so there may be some closure for that family of the victim with that in mind. We're going to take a quick break here at Long Crime. When we come back, more trial coverage. Stay tuned.